Hello, my name's Rebecca Avern, and I'm the author of the textbook Acupuncture for Babies, Children and Teenagers, which was published by Singing Dragon in 2018. And I would like to chat today about children in lockdown, the kinds of effects and impacts that it might have on children of different ages, and to put that against the backdrop of their development from a Chinese medicine perspective. And I also want to make some suggestions about things that we as parents can do to help make this time a little bit easier and to support our children of different ages through it. So I'm going to start by talking about teenagers. Now, teenagers from the Chinese medicine perspective are in a really crucial phase of development, which is resonant with the fire element. And the fire element is all to do with relationships and connections. And as any of you who have teenagers will know, their life, particularly in the early teens, is all about friendships. And actually, the developmental necessity for a teenager is to branch outside, to branch out, to go outside the family and to begin making connections with other people and forming another tribe. And whilst this can be problematic and it can be quite difficult for parents sometimes when this happens in a very intense and sudden way, it's actually a really necessary development. And it's really the teenagers that aren't doing this that we need to worry about more than those that are doing it. So, whilst this is what's going on for teenagers at the moment, what has happened is that this natural process, this drive to go outwards, has been completely and very suddenly thwarted by teenagers being on lockdown and not being able to go to school and not being able to see their friends. So it's as if there was a big kind of river, a big body of energy flowing very strongly in one direction, and then suddenly it gets blocked. And the end result of that can be enormous amounts of frustration, irritation, and anger. And if those emotions aren't given an opportunity to be expressed outwardly, then they can implode and go inwards. And when that happens, they often lead to depression. So, what can we do about this? Well, the first thing that we can do is, as parents, to perhaps be a little bit more lenient than we might be during normal life in terms of our teens' use of screens. So I am normally the first person to talk about the potential negative effects of too much screen time on our children. However, in lockdown, I think that technology has really come into its own. And if it enables teens to actually maintain their contact with their friends, then that becomes a really beneficial thing, and it's something that can help them to carry on this process of finding their tribe outside of the family, bonding with other people, making connections with other people. So I think that how much time we allow our teens on screens should perhaps be a little bit different now than it is in normal life. it obviously very much depends on what they're doing on their screens. But if whatever they're doing involves communicating with other people, then it's helpful as parents to remind ourselves that that is serving a really important developmental process for our teens. So, having said that, at the opposite end of the spectrum is the fact that whilst teenagers would often do almost anything other than admit that they still really need their parents, actually they do. So while they're going out into the world, they'll feel much more secure in doing that if they have a really solid base to come back to. And that solid base would ideally be a strong emotional connection with a parent or a parental figure and the family as a whole. So another opportunity or an opportunity that this time actually presents is for us as parents to reconnect with our teenagers. And the stronger that connection is, the more able teenagers will become to actually eventually become independent and be able to fly the nest, which is what, as parents, is the end goal: to create independent teenagers who can go off into the world and support themselves and do their own thing. So lockdown can be a time when we will have more time with our teens than we would have in the normal busy pace of life, and we can reaffirm, re-establish our connection with them, which will stand them in very good stead in the months and years to come. But there are also other possible opportunities for teens during lockdown, which I just want to mention. So the first one is that they could actually get, or they have more chance of getting, the amount of sleep that they actually need. So the majority of teens in normal life are sleep deprived. And this is largely because of the fact that their circadian rhythms are very different to those of young children and to those of adults. So melatonin, which is the hormone which signals to the brain that we're ready for sleep, is released about 2 hours later in the evening in teens than it is in young children or adults. And cortisol, which is the hormone which allows us to wake up and feel bright and alert in the morning, is released 2 hours or approximately 2 hours later in the morning in teenagers than it is in young children or adults. So because teens have to get up for school early, but often genuinely struggle to go to sleep at what we would often consider to be a reasonable time, that means they're often losing out on 1, 2, or even 3 hours sleep a night. And they are growing and developing so fast at this time, and sleep is absolutely crucial for that growth and development to happen in a healthful way. So one thing that as parents we can do during lockdown is perhaps to allow our teens to sleep in a bit in the morning and make up for some of the sleep deprivation that sadly is a part of their normal life. And another opportunity, and it's important to look for silver linings at these difficult times, is for teens to learn perhaps how to slow down and how to lean into their more yin energy. And yin is the part of us that enables us to be slow and still and calm. And in a normal teen's life, there's often not enough opportunity to lean into this yin energy. Teens these days are generally incredibly overscheduled, active, out there, stimulated all the time. So, um, although they may resist it at first, I'm certainly getting messages from parents of teens at the moment who say that now in the UK, when we're in about the second week of lockdown, their teens have got through that initial kind of frustrated phase and are now beginning to find and settle in and be more contented with a slower pace of life. And this is really important when behind the scenes they're actually growing faster than at any other time in their lives, apart from the first year of life. But it's also important because if we don't help to teach and support our children to be restful at times and to have downtime, then there's very little chance of them being able to do that as adults. And in helping to keep a balance between yin and yang, so yin is restful energy and yang is active, going out into the world energy. It's really, really important to try and maintain a balance of both as far as we can. And lockdown is definitely an opportunity to redress that balance. And it's also potentially an opportunity for teenagers to reframe what's really important in life. So teenagers can get very caught up in material reality, in their concern about their appearance. And whilst to some degree that is a necessary part of development, and most of them hopefully kind of get through it and beyond it, to try and help our teens to see that they're actually a part of history. They're part of a time that they're going to be asked about by their children and their grandchildren, that's going to be written about in history books for decades, centuries to come, and to help to take them out of their immediate, perhaps small and rather trivial concerns, and to get a bit of a glimpse of the bigger picture. And one thing that I found to be helpful talking to other parents of teens is actually to support them to do something to help the fight against the coronavirus. So it might be being able to support local elderly or vulnerable people, taking their dogs for a walk or doing some shopping for them. And actually it can be a real boost to a teen's development to be able to help out, because then they have the experience that they're actually useful, and that they have skills, and that they play an important part in life, and not only in the life of their community, but also within the family. So while teens have more time, giving them some more jobs around the house, getting them to cook a meal once a week or whatever, again, helps to boost their self-esteem and make them realise that they are an important part of the family and the community. So I would now like to talk about younger children, so primary school aged children. and the effect that lockdown might have on them and what we can do to support them. So, primary school children are obviously at a very different stage of development than teenagers. And whereas teenagers are most focused on the outside world and friendships, primary school age children are most focused on still the family and their parents and what's going on inside their household. So they haven't yet developed a sort of internal scaffolding that helps them to feel safe and secure. So, one thing that as parents we can do to support them is to help keep some routine and rhythm in their daily life. And that provides a kind of scaffolding for them. So, having regular meals and sitting down as a family to have those meals is important. Perhaps going out and taking a walk, depending on where you are in the world and whether or not that's allowed, at a similar time each day, and building up little routines, perhaps. I don't know, sitting down at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to do a jigsaw together or to play board games together. Having times throughout the day when they know a certain thing is going to happen will really help to keep younger kids feeling safe and secure. And I'm not talking about being very rigid. But I'm talking about having a routine, but a flexible routine, and having some rhythm to their life. So in Chinese medicine, the earth element of young children is immature and not fully developed. And the earth element very much thrives off this rhythm and routine. And obviously primary school age children are going to be missing that rhythm and routine that their school life previously provided. And the other key thing for younger children is a little bit more complex, a little bit more complex conceptually, but also a bit more complex in terms of how we actually put it into practice. And this is about the fact that what has probably the biggest influence on a young child's emotional state is the emotional state of their parents and their main caregivers. So children are like a mirror to their parents' internal emotional world. Now, when we talk about this, as a parent, it's very easy to immediately start being very self-critical and to go into feelings of guilt and shame that we're not doing it well enough and, we should be better parents, etc., etc. But this is really missing the point. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. It's not about good and bad. It's all about doing our best given the circumstances that we're in. And I'm fully aware that for a lot of parents of primary age children at the moment, these are extraordinarily difficult circumstances where there are added worries about money, parents trying to look after and homeschool their kids whilst working from home, health concerns, etc., etc. So this is not easy, and it's definitely not the time to start being overly critical and setting ourselves ridiculously high standards. However, whatever we can do as parents to look after our own internal emotional state will probably have more of an impact on our young children than anything else that we might do. Because children are like little sponges to the emotional environment. In Chinese medicine terms, they don't yet have enough protective chi on the outer layers of their body to give them the normal kind of barrier that we as adults hopefully have between us and the world. It's as if they don't have the ability to filter the emotional environment, so they just soak it all up very, very easily and quickly without even knowing that they're doing it. So, as a parent, it's certainly not about pretending that everything's okay when it patently isn't, but it's about perhaps ourselves doing what we know most helps us. And even if that means having to put our children in front of the television to do half an hour's yoga in the morning or meditate or whatever it is that you know helps you get into a better state for the day, the benefits to your child of you doing that will far outweigh any negatives of them sitting in front of the television for half an hour. And it's also worth really helping to acknowledge our young children's feelings, to give them words that can help them to express what they're feeling, rather than telling them that there's no need to be worried or there's no need to be angry or frustrated. Emotions are a part of life and they're not the enemy, and to just give our young children a space to express them and give them the vocabulary to help them to express them can be really valuable and helpful for them. And it's also worth trying to avoid telling your young children that you're fine when you're not. So I'm not talking about overly emoting with young children, but for example, saying perhaps, I'm really sorry that I was cross with you and I shouted at you earlier, but I've had a really frustrating day at work, but actually I'm beginning to feel better now. If children sense an emotion, but it's not being verbalized and it's being denied by the parents, then it's going to be far more worrying for them than if it's acknowledged. And then in that way, children learn that we all have a wide range of emotions and that's okay, and they don't stop the world from turning, and they're not disastrous. And finally, just that as parents, sadly, this is a time when we do need to dig incredibly deeply for the sake of our children. But in doing that, we're going to be modeling to our children that we can dig deep, that even when life is really difficult, we can survive it, we can get through it, we can get to the other side of it. And this generation are often criticised as lacking resilience. They're sometimes labelled the Snowflake Generation. Well, this is a really wonderful opportunity, despite all the horror going on in the world, to help our children develop resilience. Yes, it's difficult, but yes, we will get through it, and we will all get through it together. So I hope that those thoughts were helpful for you. If you're interested in understanding a bit more about helping children to grow up physically healthy and emotionally resilient from a Chinese medicine perspective, then please check out my blog, which is at nurturingtheyoung.com. And thank you very much for listening, and stay safe and well.